I've talked a lot with these guys. It's going to be very interesting and fun. We have talked a lot about software today and yesterday, so I'm going to switch it up to hardware because you can have the greatest software, but in the end, it is important what kind of hardware you have. Rika did a great job introducing me, so I don't have to tell you any more about me. So I'm going to hand over to the panelists, and I would say each one of you gives us a short introduction. What are you doing? What's your name? And then we can go into the discussion.
Okay.
All right.
I'm Rich Ryan. I'm the CEO of 615 Technologies. We fundamentally build rugged displays and smart glasses for industrial and military applications.
Hi, Rich.
Hi, Larry. See you again.
I'm Larry Patterson.
Larry.
Hi, Larry. Hi, Larry. My name's Larry. I am the Director of Advanced Computing Technologies for Gulfstream Aerospace in Savannah, Georgia. We build those large, beautiful business jets that I'm sure all of you flew in on. I've been running the high-performance computing division for them and started it about 15, 16 years ago. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I'm doing a lot of the AR and VR. We call it immersive realities. And we'll be talking a little bit about that.
So I was told to keep my introduction short. So first the Earth cooled, and then the dinosaurs. No, sorry, that's the long one. My name is Terry Schuessler. I'm the Director of Immersive Technology at Deutsche Telekom, and I basically create innovation projects exploring how our infrastructure, 5G connectivity, and edge compute can enable mixed reality experiences to be better, faster, and enable the devices to be lighter, like this one here. But I'll switch to my real augmented reality glasses for the time being.
So you can see the crowd.
So I can see everything. That's right.
Good afternoon. I'm John McGuire. I'm with Duke Energy. I'm an IT architect and cybersecurity guy. You may ask how I got here.
How'd you get here?
So many of you may actually know Rodney James or Alex Vukovic that I work with, and they had a project going together. They wanted to make sure that passed cybersecurity muster. So I got sucked in back in January when I first started with Duke as a full-time employee. And I have now 9 months of augmented reality under my belt, but I've found a real passion with it. And I've also,
you're an expert.
I'm now an expert and on a panel. It's amazing how fast this can work, kids. I recommend it for a career.
My name is Evelyn Morales. I work for NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston. I'm a technologist and a principal engineer for the Virtual Reality Lab. It's an official astronaut training facility. So we do a lot of training for the astronauts using VR and expanding into augmented reality.
Evelyn, welcome to Earth.
Oh, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So talking about the hardware, I always get the question, what is the best device? I know we've seen a lot of them in the next room. So my response is always, it depends on the use case you have. So what do you guys think are key factors of hardware to decide what is good for that use case? Larry, why don't you start?
You were supposed to start. It depends. Most of the technologists, like most of us, we try to look at it from our perspective. I've started over the last few years really looking at it from our customer's perspective. Because Gulfstream, we deal with the billionaires that fly $70, $80 million jets. So sometimes they don't want to put a headset on. So we've gone into things like the cave. We have some older technology that, of course, everyone can't build multi-million-dollar caves, but you walk in and it's a one-to-one experience and you put on glasses that doesn't fully immerse you so you can see and hear the people that are around you. So the customers have been doing that for a long time. But now, through the years, as it's starting to get to where the hardware is cheap enough and the software stacks are good enough to where you can link them and do real business, it's not just a toy. Now it's you put the experience on them and we can immerse them in a headgear that we can afford as companies, and they can do the full experience. They can walk into their aircraft that may not even exist anymore or may not be on the market yet. It may be something we're launching in a year or two. So we bring that customer in, they can pick where do they want their furniture, what do they want it to look like, change all of the carpets, interact with the drawers, stand inside it and see the room that you have, how large is my galley, exactly what do I need to do, and they build it with us. So we look at hardware from their perspective. Is it too encumbering to put on a headset? Great, I'll walk you into the cave. Or would you like to see, you're buying a smaller aircraft compared to another one that you have that is larger? Would you like to see the space difference? And we can put on a HoloLens and you can see that aircraft and then overlaid with another aircraft so they can see exactly the difference. There's been customers that said, I think I want to look at the 500 instead of the 280 because I believe the galley is a little bit bigger, so it's more to my liking. So it changes their total experience. I'll stop there and let somebody else answer.
So this is Gulfstream. You said headsets people could afford? Or sorry, yes. You could afford?
Yeah. No, the employees can afford.
Gotcha.
I've got my weekly withdrawal coming out. It's like $7 or $8. Right. My great grandkids can fly.
How about NASA? NASA's got a lot of money. You guys have affordability concerns?
Yeah, we need to follow a budget, right? So.
And Duke Energy is the same way. Obviously, we don't have any money, so. But yeah, the affordability I think is a really big thing. You've got to be able to get them on people and out in the world. And if you aren't going to be able to find a way to budget that out and make it cost effective, then it's probably not going to be a good solution. Okay, so what cost effective devices are you using? None at the moment, but I found a couple I like. These are. I think what I've seen since I've gotten into this, there's great value in versatility. So if all I really need is the eyepiece, then I can buy a device that maybe even just gives me an eyepiece, a heads-up display off of what's already on my cell phone. If I need something that is freestanding, maybe I have all the batteries and everything around my head and I have to pay more for a device that fits in the miniaturized environment like that. But I think that there's so many different use cases that it's difficult to buy a device that does a lot more than what you need for a specific use case because you end up spending a lot of money that you don't necessarily need to on that use case.
Yeah, I would analogize this to when the IBM PC came out and I was doing software development in the early 80s and people bought the PC. I am old. The people bought the PC in order to be able to run Lotus 1-2-3, right? And Lotus 1-2-3 literally drove sales of PCs for a couple of years in the industry. I think we're kind of at that space right now. We're transitioning from spending money on devices for a specific use case to now having to be able to support multiple use cases on the same device. So the decisions that you make in terms of picking hardware have to balance the requirements of those different use cases a little bit more effectively than just honing in on that first one. And also because devices are relatively still expensive, $2,000 to $5,000 on average. We see a demand for sharing the devices. You know, I'm working on a project at Deutsche Telekom. We're going to roll out as a pilot to 300 users, but we're only going to roll out 100 devices. So that means on average 3 people will be sharing the device. And so then there's considerations that you have to make for individual prescription inserts in order to allow the device if it's not one that can be used with existing glasses, or you have to accommodate them being discomforted by wearing contact lenses, which is generally not a good way to go. And you have to deal with hygiene, which was mentioned in a panel before lunch as sort of an important but not always considered thing. I mean, I remember demoing with a HoloLens to many, many people in March at Mobile World Congress, and we were constantly cleaning. We had 6 different devices, and we were constantly cleaning them because we really had to consider that as an important thing. And
well, let's get back to hygiene on the later point, because you're kind of like evolving very fast.
He's doing the whole
that was going to turn into
no questions needed.
But the point is the shared use case of the same device is the key thing I'm
Okay, we'll circle back to that. But Evelyn, I know that you started working with VR in early 90s. So I'm wondering what changed in those 20 years considering the hardware?
Well, that's a very interesting, obviously question. But as we went through the 90s using actually a COTS helmet, for example, for our environment to immerse the astronauts into the training. We have to buy it, and it was extremely expensive. We're talking about over $100,000 for one helmet. And we have 2 astronauts to train, usually in the environment. So as we went through, we never we're able to find the perfect helmet that will have the power that we needed and all the pieces that we wanted. So we have to actually kind of customize it ourselves, and we did that for our case. But there is a reality that we only have a few people to train with. So when we're talking about a full population of people, then you have another problem going. So in that regards, we move along into creating customizing the second device, and then the third generation came to, we did it. We actually built our own with displays, and we built it in-house, and we used that for a couple of years until we got the very inexpensive helmets that we're using today, like the Vibes or the Oculus, etc. And now we're able to, every 6 months, if we can, just switch them around and see what is better. So we're constantly moving. But again, our number of people that we're providing this is small. But there's all these questions about, cleanliness, portability, and that has to be looked upon. What is your problem? What is the problem you're trying to solve? And even if it's for an experience, or everybody has a problem that tries to solve with the systems that are available right now. And as you look deeper, then you'll find the right helmet for you at the right moment. And if everything underneath is being built to actually organically to propagate to new hardware, then you will be able to successfully evolve with the technology. And that's what we have done through all these years. When I started, it was like that. It was just very expensive. And then now we're able to switch them pretty quickly. The same with the software. We develop our own software. So we couldn't wait for Unreal and all these graphic engines to be up to the level. We couldn't wait for that. We had to train the astronauts to perform all these spacewalks for the space station. So we have to find a way to build our own graphics, which we did. Before, actually, I think Unity was out there, but we couldn't use that because it didn't have all the elements that we needed to manipulate, to generate all these graphics for the astronauts for their training. So, it is case by case, very specific. We can go on.
Okay.
Or I can go on.
Well, out of that, I think it is really cool that we actually all have access to the same technology that NASA uses to train astronauts.
Exactly. Yes.
It's very interesting that you are not building your own hardware, but actually accessing all the same that we access to.
Right.
So talking about the hardware, Rich, you're kind of like the expert on the hardware side, since you're a technology company that's trying to build the perfect smart glass. So we've heard that we have a kind of like challenges talking about hygiene. Some might have battery challenges. I know that we had to build an own power control to keep the glass running throughout the whole shift. So what is your approach on solving those challenges, or maybe finding compromises in that?
So I think for us as a hardware company, and I think all the hardware companies probably share this, the first thing you have to do is really be very myopic on the use cases you want to address. Because until you really determine that, the trade-offs that you have to make between technology decisions that affect cost, battery power, usability, all-day wearability, all vary so much. So, for us as a hardware company, we look at the spectrum of augmented reality from, on the left-hand side, I'll call it, very simple, maybe even occluded informational type displays to the eye. And as you move to the right, you can actually start interacting, obviously, with the real world, all the way up to, visualization of 3D imagery. That spectrum really drives how we develop hardware and custom solutions. So, for us personally, we've kind of really isolated kind of more left-hand of the side spectrum for to address our current hardware. But we also typically do a lot of customization for particular DoD customers. And within that, it's really incumbent on the end user or the customer side to really know what matters. It's not uncommon for someone within the Department of Defense to come up and say, well, I need a really high resolution display, and I need this and this and this and this. And when you really drill down to their use case, it comes out, well, no, you actually don't need a high resolution display, so that just saved you $15,000. You don't need these things. So I think from from companies that are on the side who are evaluating what they need, not getting caught up in kind of the just getting the highest level of tech may not be necessary for your use case, and therefore you can address your use case in a lower cost manner.
Okay, so we just saw Houston nodding very.
And that's a very important thing, because you can't wait for the technology to be there for you to do everything that you dream of.
That's right.
That is a reality. You have to work in the underlying, the content, and you got to work in all these other pieces that is what you're projecting to your customer, or what you need to present to your customer. And in that regards, I mean, I remember early on when we were using the very expensive helmets, and there was a lot of lag in the system. So you will move your head and, oh my gosh. But what happened is that we understood that not only that's something that we couldn't fix right away, that things move very slow in space. So you know what? We concentrated in what was important, and in our case was to present all the procedure for a spacewalk, for example. And I was part of doing the Hubble Space Telescope service and mission in '93. So we did that, and we did all that very complex scenario. So immediately you understand the content and what goes behind is more important, your infrastructure. And then the hardware will come. And if you make it agile enough, you're going to be able to integrate new technology as it gets better, and it will get better. I mean, I've seen it throughout all my life. At NASA, we constantly are immediately looking for the new technology or pieces that we can integrate in what we have. So, don't wait for, that perfect hardware to be there.
I like something you said, though. I think the more I look at the different things that are out here with kind of fresh eyes compared to some of you maybe, I think the versatility is the important thing. So if you can find a platform that gives you maybe a bunch of different options, but can still really is focused on the use cases that you want to deploy right now. Or maybe you have use cases you want to deploy, there's nothing out there.
And this is something that I stress a lot in my talks, is that people forget about what is your solution, your problem. I mean, you look at, there's here, what can we do with it? Well, yeah, great. That's what most of the people do. This is something new, let's try to use it. But in reality, you need to know what is your content? What is it that you're trying to solve by putting somebody under the helmet or using augmented reality? For example, right now we're investigating about the use of AR. And I say investigating, even though we do have some kind of solution cases for using augmented reality, a new helmet, to train astronauts on the ground. And, we realized, the technology might not be quite there to what I want to do, but I can already do the cases and have some of the content built to wait for the technology to be there. So think of the content and that solution for your customers. It's just extremely important.
I think that's actually a pretty good point, because a lot of people have their idea software-wise, but I experience a lot that the hardware is not there where the idea is yet. So a lot of people are willing to make compromises in order to use the technology and move forward. So have you any experience of you who are using the glasses on making those compromises, that you might have an idea, but you say, okay, the glass is not there yet, so let's try to move this package and then go on once the hardware is there?
I've made compromises in one way, which is looking past the hardware as the pain point and looking for enabling software that might address some of the requirements that I have. Is part of my work. I'm focusing on how we can offload some of the compute from the devices to the network to extend the capability of the device to do things that the device can't do. For example, if I want to render a 50 million polygon model, no device in the market today is going to be able to handle the compute on device for that. The HoloLens maybe 200,000-300,000 polygons. So this is where we start looking at extending the ecosystem of the hardware with the network infrastructure and putting technology on a campus or on edge compute or even in the backhaul that enables for me to be able to either dynamically render on the network and stream the video of that render to the device, or actually dynamically download a level of detail-based subset of the model data or the point cloud data to the device. So there's a number of companies, because the device makers are so heavily focused on weight and battery life and form factor, there's a number of challenges that can't be solved by waiting for the device makers to get there iteratively 9 months at a time. So this is where we start looking hard at, and a lot of companies are forming around solving the problems through software. There are companies, for example, doing single camera SLAM in real-time spatial mapping indoors that's highly accurate that we were looking for the hardware to do a year ago. And now they can do it off a single camera, off of a cell phone, or a single lightweight camera on a device. And that enables me to build use cases that I could never have done before. So we look not just at the limitations of the hardware, but then we start looking at the ecosystem and who's building the right kind of enabling software technologies, SDKs that we can integrate into our solution.
Okay. Anyone who wants to add something?
Well, I have a use case, actually. It's a true use case. I'm not going to name the hardware that we're using just because I don't want to promote anybody, but yeah. But we're using some augmented reality technology right now to actually help an astronaut train on the ground into what is maintenance, maintaining a satellite. And we realized very quickly that our helmets that are available, the augmented reality that we have right now, will not handle sometimes things that are very close to your eyes, for example. And so we're trying, okay, what do we do? Okay, let's try to move this a little farther away. What are the areas that we're gonna to centralize the training for? What is it that he or she will need to understand the workflow of the procedure, what they need to do for that? So, we have to compromise with the hardware, and it depends on the content, again, in that solution. And at the end of the day, we may end up going and try to train the astronaut, which is going to happen hopefully in November, and realize it's not there, it's not here yet. I can't they're not going to get a positive training. So we might have to wait a little bit, or it might be just a part of a process, of a chain of activities that we will do before we do it for real. So those are compromises that you make. In terms of, we were able successfully actually to run and render about 10 million polygons of our space station on one of these devices, which was very exciting. And I think that the future for example, augmented reality is super incredible, and we're looking forward to do more of that. So.
Oh, sounds very exciting. So switching the gears a little bit, talking about safety issues. John, I know you wanted to bring a smart glass into a power plant to make it a safer place. I know you said it's a very safe place, but I think all the other people that have never been to a power plant are still like, okay, if you say so. So what are kind of like the key factors for you looking at a smart glass regarding safety, durability, reliability, to be able to bring it in such an environment?
Right. I think, and specifically, I've spent 4 years working on cybersecurity programs in nuclear plants, right? So it kind of adds a layer of things to look out for. I know where there's cords involved, when we have lanyards where we have to hang all of our dosimeters and our name badges and everything, those have to be breakaway because there's a lot of spinning equipment and there's lots of opportunity for things to get caught. So you don't wear loose clothing, you have that lanyard that's rigged so that it will break away. I think that would be an important aspect for any corded connection. So if we're using Google Glass out in a nuclear plant with one of your battery backups, that cord should be able to pull off and not drag me into whatever device caught it. For a nuclear plant, it's going to be important that it can be cleaned, right? If you're in an environment where there is some contamination, even just radon gas floats around in there, and usually that's the kind of thing we'll see on the way out that might tip a scanner. And usually that'll evaporate itself and be able to go ahead and pull an electronic device out of the plant in the course of a day. Sometimes there may actually be contamination stuck to it. It's statically charged, so it's going to stick to plastics. And so you'd have to be able to clean that surface with the tools that we use so that it doesn't become nuclear waste. I don't want a $2,000 headset to, and frankly, if it's got a particle stuck to it, I'm not going to put it back on my head. So
Exactly.
So I think that those are probably really important aspects in that environment. And I think probably for a lot of other manufacturing environments as well, you want to make sure you have that breakaway capability.
All right. So you said putting it back on my head. So I think that leads us to a very important factor, the human-centered, device. The worker is, in that scenario, very important, but because the wearable doesn't bring us any efficiency or benefits whatsoever without being worn. So Rich, again, talking about the hardware, what are some key factors that your partners want for their use cases?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about safety, we talk a lot about hygiene, we talk a lot about these factors, and typically the off-the-shelf solutions have one or multiple issues that we found in working with OEMs who really want to get a product out to scale. The largest things we've all talked about, you've got heat generating from the processor at their head, you've got heat generating from the battery, you've got a blockage of peripheral vision at times, you've got neck strain from wearing something that's too heavy for too long. So all of these issues, when we really think about it, and when we think about what's preventing scale for some of these hardware companies, when you see some of the ROIs that are coming out in manufacturing environments or logistics and warehousing, you do kind of scratch your head and say, why is not every warehouse worker there? And so that's large, and granted, I'm biased, right, because we're making hardware. But that's largely the research we've been doing for 2 years, with employees out there to really determine what types of trade-off do you need to make. And so a lot of the objectives that we've had and that have been pushed to us from customers are, I want to be able to reuse the device, but I don't want to share the same thing that touches my face to the guy that just had it, the guy or gal that had it for 8 hours before. So, think about modularity and think about being able to say, okay, whatever mounts to my face is mine, but then I have a device that I can switch. And oh, by the way, I want to be able to clean it quickly. So, you have to be able to submerge it in a chemical cleaning solution. It has to be light enough that I'm not getting neck strain. I can't have something that blocks my peripheral view. And these are really the things that I think now as hardware is evolving in the enterprise workspace, now you're talking to warehouse managers, production supervisors, and that's really where you see a lot of these, when you start getting out of the CTO office about exploring augmented reality and you start getting onto the manufacturing floor and you've got folks that have been doing operations for a long time and they'll say, I can't put that on, my 3 shifts of worker. It's disgusting. And oh, by the way, how am I going to manage charging battery for 4,000 people in my warehouse if I have a new battery? So I think these are the considerations that we're seeing now. There is really cropping up more that pilots are growing, pilots are expanding, and you're really getting to the people who have to deal with the problems of implementing a device throughout. So those are a lot of the big issues that we've heard from our customers saying, we need to solve this before we can go from a 20-person pilot to a 5,000-person rollout.
And some of that solution might be really that this becomes a technology that is personalized. It's like having your own phone. The same thing with any extremities or biometric helper might have to be individualized. Yeah. Meaning you go get it yourself based on your job instead of the other way, because that's what I've been thinking. This is very personal. Hygiene, tons of problems. We actually have visitors coming to our laboratory and ask us that question. How can we deploy this for museums? I'm like, oh my gosh. And they went to all this study and they realized it's just impossible. So they decided to do something different. So, the thing here is that I believe that looking forward, this is going to have to be very individualized to the person. And they will request it based on their needs. their work, their environment.
And I think you do see that in certain use cases, right? But now you're talking about a much higher ROI use case with a potentially long-term, employee. I think again, when you talk about use cases on the other end of the spectrum, where you have extreme, look at warehousing logistics, right? You've got extremely high turnover. You've got an incredibly differentiated peak employment base, during the Christmas season than you do otherwise. And so the reality of trying to, have these folks have their own device, you've got to solve it through some hardware modifications. You've got to solve it through, better mounting, better adjustability, and come up with some other things. But again, on the other end of the spectrum, when you have very high ROI use cases where you're doing visualization and maybe design work, collaborative design work where you're doing these things, then it totally makes sense. And so again, I kind of go back to that use case of, getting more and more focused on exactly what you're trying to do and what that return on investment is, leads you to these same decisions. Is this an individualized item or is it not?
Or it could be for a group, right? It's one for a group or one individualized. So depending on what your scenario is.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
What strikes me on this is that we kind of have a situation where you want to be able to have a use once device, at least the part that touches a person's head, right? So 3D movies, we got these disposable glasses that they recycle every time you go in. Maybe, don't tell anybody, this might be a good business idea. Maybe we develop cardboard or plastic glasses that are clear that we clip something like it's a clip-on unit to that doesn't actually touch the person's face, and that becomes.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
We're actually there right now.
Oh, there you go.
You want to come by the booth?
Get out over there.
You want to come by the booth? But in all honesty, that is the approach we've taken, right? Because we are addressing a large employee base. So we have said, look, you can issue a $2, pair of frame that goes on, and then I can take this module, and that module never has to touch the individual. But that's a shameless plug. I'm sorry.
You're welcome.
I was specifically told not to do that.
You followed right through like I liked you.
Would be shameless or plug?
Both.
Both. Yeah. One thing that Rich, you mentioned that strikes me is we're people ask me sort of what am I going to do next year, right? And what we're doing this year is we're building very short time duration use cases, 15-minute to 30-minute kind of very focused task type of use cases. And the devices, like you said, they're coming out of the office of the CTO. A lot of these are in trials and pilots, and they're just sort of one-off test cases. But what we haven't been really analyzing as much as what kind of wear and tear we're going to put on a device when they're using it for 1 hour, 2 hour use cases, all day use cases, and sharing the device, and how well will it handle being dropped? People are human. Oops. I just smashed my phone screen. How many times have we broken a phone screen, right? I've raised my hands. So these realities have to be factored into the selection of the hardware in terms of, people look sometimes at devices which are, certified Division 1, blah, 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 Class 3, and for me, it's can I drop the glasses on the ground and will they break? And not care about, the eye safety is important, but the other aspect of it is just the durability aspect. So sometimes the devices that you might pick might not necessarily be binocular and fancy, but they might be more durable because they're light. When they hit the ground, they're going to bounce instead of break. And so that becomes a factor. The other thing you have to look at, as somebody mentioned in an earlier discussion, is the life cycle of the applications that you're building. Are you building an application that's going to last for the 9 months before the next version of that device comes out? Or are you going to put so much time and investment into the project and it's going to have such an unchanging use model that it will last for 2 to 4 years? And so that has to be a factor in sort of planting the stake in the ground and deciding which hardware am I going to invest in now. Most of the AR projects I'm involved in, the CapEx budget for the hardware exceeds the software by a long shot. So for me, it's an important factor in deciding, which devices we're going to lock in on for.
So you mean I can't pick a device now and use the same device for 10 years like I do my laptop PC?
No.
Well,
Talking about the budget.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 or 3 years.
That's a joke. You shouldn't use laptops for 10 years either.
But maybe 2 or 3 years.
Right.
It might be a practical reality.
Right.
Or you may just be waiting for that next iteration in 6 or 7 months, like we were talking earlier. Because if the new one comes out, you've gotten used to what the other one could do. I'm in my flight simulator. I have a pilot flying the new aircraft, and they're using an Oculus. And so they can't see anything around, but they have the side stick, they have the throttles, they have their controls. They may look into maybe using Varho so you can magnify. And no, I'm not plugging any particular one. I'm just talking of an experience that we've used. We're not pitching anyone. There's my disclaimer. But you're sitting in that, and I'm waiting. You know, it would be nice to have, we all want full field of view. You know, you're talking about periphery. Well, I want all of it to be in my experience because some of those use cases are about my experience. I'm delivering something that I can't deliver yet. It's not real. So I want you to experience it as if it were. So you can try all the things of having the coffee pot sitting beside you as they walk through the galley, and we can try all the tricks. But the real thing is about the experience, and can I make my decision? Can I get what I wanted? And it may be a little inferior. It may not be quite as clear. My marketing guys may say, this is the swatch. This isn't as perfect on a Vive or an Oculus. Or if you put it in a HoloLens and try to match it, it just doesn't look the same. So no, I don't want to use this. And it's about, wait a minute, I want to show a new experience and to be able to make decisions and do something more with the technology using 3D data that I already have, that I've already spent millions of dollars on in the company. Why go back to 2D and show them a piece of paper? Why not put them in a device and let them see the HUD and let them figure exactly what they want on the heads-up display? Do new controls, do new prototyping. And you guys were talking about a lot more out in the world. So mine, that is kind of limited to your designers and to your sales guys. But then rolling out to the floor, they may be waiting on something totally different. Like you're saying, neck strain, and this one's too heavy. Well, I can sit there for a 15-minute experience in a room, tethered to a box. That doesn't matter to me as the experience. I'm not going, man, I need it lightweight and bulletproof and all of the things because I'm not the special forces guy running out in front of the bullets. But I want something different. Yes, we would love to have one device that answers it all. Give me the longest battery life. Give me AR and VR. Give me something that looks like, did you see my new Burberry? No, mine are better. These are my new reality glasses. They're not virtual or augmented. They're just reality. So Burberry just came out with them. So we all want that and want to be able to say, Burberry, answer my question and give me whatever and work with it. That would be great, but it's silly. We want to do something for the experience. It is about that experience. It is about what they need to go to NASA. And I'm not doing all the big stuff. Mine's just, for a company doing business. But I want it all, but do we really need it all?
And that's a good point. And I want to give you an example. We train astronauts underwater to do a specific hand tooling kind of activity. When we started VR, we used to have mock-ups. Very costly, very difficult to reconfigure. But then there was the graphics that we started to experiment and build all these scenarios in computing. It ended up that towards the years, we realized graphics and having VR allows to reconfigure this environment easily and to actually show the astronauts the full capacity, immensity of building in a space station, for example. So there wasn't any other way to replicate space but using virtual reality. And that's what we did. And that's how this type of technologies fit into your problem. Getting the solution for that problem that you're looking at and that you're looking to solve. And that's how, when they come to our lab and to train with us, they basically are training into the spatial awareness. The spatial awareness is what they're going to be looking at when they get out of the vehicle to do in a spacewalk or to do any robotics operation or anything like that. So that's something that cannot be replicated any other way. So that's how the technology came into place. And we're looking into augmented to actually do even more, augment an astronaut.
I always go back to just remember, you said it earlier, what is the problem? So if it's an experience that you're trying to do I need the swatch to match perfectly to where, oh, you fake me out, man, that looks real. Well, of course, it's all about reality, but you want it to be close enough to be a great experience and to where if I pick that palette, when I see it, okay, yes, that's what I wanted. But does it have to be perfect? In augmented reality, do I need to see all the detail? All of my guys that work, they always want to put out the perfect product. And I'm like, guys, this is rolling into our business.
Concentrate.
Stop thinking about I've got a project to do that has to be perfect at the end of 3 months and do a project. What if every week you're giving them something to where they can make a decision that they couldn't make last week? That's the power of the tools and the power of the technology. So it's not always just about what I see, even though these are visual devices and it's about what I see, but it's not about do I perfect it? What do I use it for, and what am I going to be making a decision about? And use it for whatever you need.
And that's why we tweak the helmets. We were building them. We tweak them to kind of do something similar to what we wanted, not perfectly. Yeah. And the helmets that we used in the beginning were very heavy,
and
so we have to upload.
A fishbowl wrapped around my head.
I mean, and we have something that the buggy eye, and I mean, and we have to upload it. We have to, do so many things. But what was important for us was the content and what that astronaut was gonna get that was not gonna get any other place. And that's what you need to concentrate is that solution, that improvement every time to getting something a little better and more efficient, doing more positive training for us, obviously.
I think, not to pile on this topic, but I think it is a really interesting part of the conversation because we demand a lot of software developers, agile development, rapidly kind of iterate. But for some reason in the hardware space, we feel like, well, if the first time I use it, I don't like it, well, this is never going to work for me. And I think a lot of us in the hardware space are trying to think about this in a more modular, flexible fashion so that we can get something into your hands and the project doesn't fail because of something that we can fix rapidly. So, don't just throw it away and say, oh, I couldn't adjust it, I couldn't get it, only half the people couldn't, get the iBox dialed in right. Okay, well, let's kind of solve that problem very quickly. Like, let's create a different mount. Let's, create some more adjustability. And so I do see kind of in our industry where there are ways and manners where you as end users of hardware need to view it as not a fixed item. Because whether it's a product development cycle where your suggestions and your feedback will take effect in 6 to 12 months, or whether it's something where you work with someone who's able to rapidly prototype stuff and solve your problems, the faster you kind of get that data back to hardware manufacturers, I think the quicker we'll have more solid solutions. And I think the other thing that amazes me, I'm sure many of you just read about Microsoft HoloLens and Magic Leap being some of the competitors for the new Army HUD 3.0 project. We actually are kind of stepping away, even though we've supplied hardware to the military forever, because their requirements, if you read the requirements, it's exactly what you just said. They want to have one set of glasses where they can train AR, VR. It specifically says a set of glasses where you can do AR training and VR training. And we want that same headset to be the tactical headset for the individual soldier.
Yeah.
It literally, all of that defies laws of physics. Like it
does.
It's, but some of those mindsets are still there, and I clearly it's shifting. I don't think folks here have those mindsets.
I want to switch it.
A little switch.
Yeah. VR, AR. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and realistically, we don't have that anywhere else in the world, right? We don't have one set of eyeglasses that everybody wears.
Right.
Exactly.
We don't have one set of headphones.
That's a good point right there. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, you're fine.
Taking a little.
5 minutes.
Oh, we're down at 5.
We have got 5 minutes. So I promise that we will circle back to the hygiene topic that you...
Oh boy, here we go.
Here we go. I give you 1 minute.
Right,
because I want to open up the discussion to the audience. I'm sure we have some questions over here. So very quick, tell me, what did you do, or what is your plan for your 300 glasses deployment, or 300 people and 100 glasses deployment to kind of keeping track with the hygiene?
So one of them is we're probably going to use a device that has separate prescription inserts. And so there'll be a mindset that people will want to clean their own prescription insert and then also clean the device as part of that flow. And sort of building that sort of muscle memory into a daily practice for using the device is part of our plan. because we're probably going to use a device that does not allow for regular glasses to be worn concurrently. So that's one key thing, and the other is to create a sense of ownership over the product, because you take care of things that are yours. In a shared use case model, that's a challenge, but trying to do that by having a device that's specific to 3 people rather than just in a pool is one approach to create a little bit more of a sense of ownership over the device.
Okay, that's a very interesting approach.
I like that.
Quickly talking to glass today, I realized that on certain devices you can use alcohol-based. Certain devices you can't use alcohol-based. It's a lot of it is in the training. In some of the headset VR, you know, the little pads, some kind of device that you can throw away, a little foam insert or whatever that are the throwaways. But then still cleaning it, and we have the billionaires that walk in and they just. Sometimes they're like, I don't want to put that on my face after someone else had it on theirs.
Well, I kind of can understand that. You know, next week when
I'm
I come for
exactly
my
like that
plane,
too.
I want a fresh one.
I will give you a fresh one when you buy your next 650.
All righty. All right. I think we can go on and on for hours, but as I said, we have 3 minutes now. I'm sorry, I planned more time for the audience, but you're very welcome to raise your hand, have a question, and we have someone with a microphone coming to you so we can actually hear your question. So do we have questions?